Hello, everybody. My name is Alexey Krabrov. I'm the founder and organizer of Bay.Area.AI, which is the most established AI meetup in Bay Area and the world. And here we are with Roie, who is a DevRel advocate from Pinecone. And we later have a program on RAG in various kinds, vector RAG, graph RAG. And I'm AI community architect at Neo4j. And we have an integration coming up with Pinecone. And there is a blog post on both Neo4j and Pinecone, so we're very happy to have Roie. And we're just going to talk about DevRel things.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds great.
So tell us a little bit, what you do at Pinecone, how do you do the DevRel, and where have you been before, like how you came to this point in your career?
Yeah, for sure. I'll start with the second part. I've been an engineer for almost 20 years, mostly worked in startups. And started at Pinecone about 2 years ago after doing my first DevRel stint at a company called Acerto out of Seattle. And before that, worked at a company called Mana that dealt with a lot of AI before the ChatGPT craze started. So at Pinecone, I would say that the job is kind of broken into two main parts. One is kind of ideating and figuring out interesting use cases for our customers and kind of showcasing the capabilities of the product, right? And exploring different modalities that it could be used in. And because Pinecone is a database, a vector database, it's a very fundamental piece of a lot of different AI applications. And so we have the leeway to kind of decide where we want to go, how we want to attack, which vertical, and as a DevRel, right, it's a lot of fun to have that clear canvas to kind of experiment on.
Interesting. I like that you mentioned that you were doing AI before AI became fashionable, right? We started at our meetup 10 years ago with NLP, and then data mining, if people remember that, machine learning, and now it's all AI, right? So I wonder, you've seen AI evolve into this. Do you see any patterns, the first wave of deep learning, because I think a lot of folks just came into this, and I think it's all new. Do you see any history repeating itself, any kind of fun parallels?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's always the hype cycle and release of a lot of different technologies that we've seen out there. And the question is always what's the staying power? So similar to mobile and social that kind of rose and kind of became a thing, right? And you don't talk about them anymore, even though they're still powering so much of our lives. I think AI is going to become that, so out of the hype cycle perhaps, but still very central in our lives in ways that are a little bit more subtle. And in that sense, I think that what happens with a lot of technologies in this space is that, again, they stop becoming this one shiny thing, and instead people start understanding how to compose them with other existing technologies and capabilities. With AI, I think it's going to be the same. So instead of just thinking that the entire word is LLMs and only LLMs are going to save us, I think that with RAG and other patterns that are sort of developing, we're slowly beginning to understand that there's a lot of value still to be had from systems that we would call traditional or less modern, quote unquote. And that's exciting to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. It's there is a whole stack, right? And there is emerging stacks. So I wonder if you can talk about, Pinecone was, I think, a leader in RAG, right? You guys were early out of the gate. So how did you see it from the inside, the evolution? What are the parts of AI stack you see the most? How do you see this evolving, with Pinecone in the middle of it?
Yeah, I think that the fundamental understanding in Pinecone and specifically our founder Ido Liberty is that the volumes of unstructured data are going to rise, and that the best way to leverage that data would be in the way of embeddings. Right? In the way of some when we say embeddings, we say some mechanism that can make sense of this unstructured data in some programmatic way. And I think that in that sense, it's a long-term bet, right? So there's all of these different modalities that we're seeing now, right? RAG is one way to leverage that capability of handling unstructured data by using embeddings.
Yep.
Doing image search and doing all sorts of other kind of operations on unstructured data can prove to be very lucrative as well in the future, right? So I think we're keeping our options open, but we're also trying to leverage on opportunities that are kind of immediate, where we can help our customers and our users by making their lives easier. For example, with RAG, right, like which is still a very big portion of our activity. We just released Assistant, and that is just a very simple way of getting a RAG stack kind of started without having to know the intricacies of how to do chunking and how to do embedding properly and how to like go about all of the evaluation steps on your own. You get that as a sort of like an API, and I think that is as a direction, right? Like we have this like very wide scope of things that you could do with the infrastructure, but also very specific type of implementations that we want to kind of usher and help people build.
That's awesome. I love it, right? So like Assistant will help people to take the documents, put them in RAG and do it properly, and then they're like go their own business.
They're in business.
That's great. So you're a DevRel, and like you go to you talk to developers. Can you talk a little bit like what do you see? Because it's super hard. Like I think the difference from previous waves of AI, like you think deep learning was hard. Like look at this stuff. Like the change is much faster. There's much more new stuff, right? Like how do you cope with this yourself? And like how do you see developers coping? Like what questions do they ask the most? Like how do we go about basically teaching the community the best practices?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I think that like you're right. Like I think that the people are overwhelmed by like just the sheer number of possibilities in front of them. There's I would classify like the world into two very general groups, like people who know what they want to do and people who don't know what they want to do. So, and I think that there's like a very big group of people who see a lot of very cool tools and are like, I want to use these tools, but they don't know what they want to do with these tools. These people have like a very different problem from the second group, which we kind of try to empower, right? So like the first group, right? Our job as DevRels is to basically show the art of the possible, right? So like basically show them what are the types of problems that you can go about solving with this thing. And then once you've found how your problem maps to this problem, you're more than likely to follow the same path, right? So these are the materials we'll pull out for them. For people who know exactly what it is that they want to do, they just want to get to the brass tacks of how to stand these things up, right? Like the problem there becomes more of knowing all of the different details and factors that influence the way you construct your stack as a whole. That gets like the combinatorics of that kind of explode now when you have like all of these new things and systems that you have to think about that you didn't need to think about before. So part of it is kind of like just general engineering premises that are, for example, right, like when you build the RAG pipeline, don't just build the RAG pipeline and say things will be good. You need to have an evaluation, paradigm, tool, mechanism there in place to actually know, right, that you're doing a good job or not doing a good job. So like even going about that whole pipeline is not necessarily true for a lot of people. So that's the other aspect, right? Like it's trying to give people the tools and the flows, right, and examples that kind of tell them how to compose all the different tools that exist in this ecosystem. Because unfortunately for us, right, like we cannot as a database, right, operate in like a vacuum.
That's right.
Like we're reliant on the entire
ecosystem. Like do one thing, right? Like and then delegate, right?
Exactly.
That's great. And so the last question for DevRel, and then I just have like a fun question, is we started a new series called DevRel.AI, right? And so that's also URL, of course. And this is basically how to keep it real doing DevRel in AI times. And so you've been doing it for a long time. I'm coming back to DevRel, after like interesting things. So what's your advice to DevRels operating in this super hard world? How do you keep it real? How do you make it interesting? What should you do to really like make developers happy?
Yeah, I mean, for me at least, the joy has always been at helping people understand what problems they're trying to solve specifically, to sort of try and untie them from the ways that they think about solving a problem, and that becoming kind of like the thing that corners you into a very particular solution, or even worse, right? When you start with a solution and like then you limit the scope of your problem to begin with, right? So I think like that, like having like the knowledge, right, of the tools that you're promoting, right, is super important, because then you can enable people to think about problems in a certain way, right? And I think that people that work with, graph databases have a very particular way of thinking about the world. I think that now, with my experience using vectors and graphs and other things like type systems, et cetera, have a way to think about the world. And I think that as long as I can, help people, I understand like what their goals are very specifically, right? Then it allows me to, come up with potential, recommendations and technical solutions and actually be effective. So I think that works for me. I don't know if it works for everybody.
I love it, and I think it's like it's the like eternal truth. Know your tools, learn your options, right? Like it's not magic. Learn how this stuff works. Programming language, know it well, know evals, right? Like learn the components, and then you can put them together.
Yep.
Love it. And the last question, like, tell us something fun about yourself. Like, what's a fun fact about you? What do you like to do for fun?
Yeah. So fun facts. I've been playing flute for about 25 years or so.
Oh, wow.
I play other instruments.
Is it classical music?
I don't play classical music anymore. I used to play classical music. I used to be in a choir when I was like a really
fantastic,
really young kid. But yeah, no, I still love playing music. I play piano, bass, stuff like that. But yeah, mostly with myself.
Fantastic. Yeah. This is great. Like, I think a lot of folks in AI, originally I started with artists, philosophers, musicians. Like, it's really great to have all of this coming together. Well, thank you, Roie, so much.
Yeah, thank you.
We're looking forward to your talk.
All right. Thank you so much. All right.